Welcome back to FastForward U Presents Start Here, the podcast about entrepreneurship and innovation, brought to you by FastForward U at Johns Hopkins University. I'm one of your hosts, Carrie Ingram, and I'm bringing you a super quick intro right from our space because we are slowly getting back to a normal groove and it's super exciting. But today's episode features Kevin Carter talking to Ansh Bhammar, who is the co-founder and co-CEO of Forager One. This is a long but really fantastic interview full of a lot of information, tips, tricks, etc. So I'm not going to make this intro super long. So if you're ready to hear more about Ansh, then just keep on listening or watching or both.
Well, I am very excited to introduce our next guest in this Founder Journey series, who is Ansh Bhammar, the co-founder and the co-CEO of Forager One. So Ansh was a 2018 KSAS alum who really helped to revolutionize the way that JHU undergrads, along with undergrads all over the country, find research opportunities. This really arose out of a problem that he and his co-founder Yash found or experienced themselves after sending a collective hundreds of emails to faculty researchers with very few actual responses. Neither of them actually ended up with an arrangement they liked. So Ansh and Yash linked up with their future technical co-founders, Michael and Nitin, who also experienced this problem firsthand, to make sure that eager freshmen wouldn't find themselves in the same situation in the future. And thus, Forager One was born. So the Forager One team worked extensively with the FastForward U office before my time. We're just talking about their time with Qasim, the true trailblazer of FastForward U. When they were in FastForward U and currently students, they won the O'Connor Fund grant, which is now defunct. They won the Summer Undergraduate Entrepreneurship Award. And then last year, as alums, they actually took home the $30,000 Pashadi Student Prize. So today, Ansh is going to be with us to go through his journey from student researcher to student entrepreneur to full-fledged founder of Forager One. So everyone, please give a large off-mute welcome to Ansh. Woo! So again, really excited to have you here for this, and I want to just start with the beginning. Seems like a good place to start. So freshman year, I guess 2014, fall 2014. You arrive at Hopkins, and you want to conduct research. Can you tell me what it was like trying to find a research opportunity as a freshman and actually identify what one was a good fit? And just at what point did you realize that there has to be a better way?
So funny. I mean, I'm sure you guys all know this too. It's like when you go from like being a senior in high school to going back to a freshman at college, like it's at first you have that first semester where like, oh, I got this, like everything's good, it's all the same, like I conquered high school, I can conquer college. And then you have this like almost unwarranted optimism that all of the opportunity that exists at the institution, whether it's like student clubs or research, is like gonna fall into your like hands and everything will work out. And that's kind of how we felt about research. Like Yash and I were actually randomly paired roommates, probably because we both had dust allergies. So we got paired in Woolman, which is like the only place that didn't have like some amount of carpeting or something. Anyways, so when me and him were actually like trying to find research, we started going through like all of the Hopkins department sites and just like creating these massive Excel sheets of faculty and like what they were working on from like their department site information. And honestly, I had like between the two of us, I think we had like shortlisted like 200 different faculty that we were like potentially interested in contacting. Started reaching out to them, just got like a few no's, mostly like no responses for like weeks at a time. I think it ended up taking like 2 months before we ended up like getting into our first sort of like interview with a faculty member. And we realized like the whole process, there was this mismatch between, faculty who are ready to take on students and mentor people to students who are looking for opportunities. So that's kind of when we realized like this could be easily averted if there's just one place that people would go, faculty would go if they're looking for students and vice versa.
Interesting. So it sounds like your MVP for Forager One was kind of just an Excel sheet, something that you were able to mainly make for yourself. Is that something you sent out to other students? Did word get around that, hey, they have something here that can help us find research? Or was that something you kind of kept to yourselves?
So that was something that we shared with a few of our peers, and then because like we started like scraping the information ourselves for like 100 to 200 like different faculty profiles, and specifically like biology, neuroscience, and like anything related to life sciences, which was like a lot of people, obviously at Hopkins. And then we actually started, that's how we came across Mike and Nitin, our technical co-founders, was like, there's got to be an automatic way to scrape this information. So our like first version of Forager One had nothing to do with actually faculty members and faculty users or admin. It was just a bunch of scraped information that our two technical co-founders had like made these scripts for. And we made this like giant database that we got about like 300 of our friends, like between the four of us, we just got like 300 of our friends like on this database. And that's kind of, yeah, that was like the first version.
Wow. So what kind of feedback did you get from the early stages from your friends? Did they find it much easier? Were they able to make any connections that they otherwise wouldn't be able to make? What was that whole process like?
It was a valiant effort, but there were two things that I think we learned from that process. When you're like aggregating data, the quality of the data depends on the source. So people were kind of frustrated when they're like, okay, you guys have like, we've collected all this stuff, but like, how useful actually is it? And so we're like, okay, we need to find ways to like augment this data from either like the faculty users themselves, like either opting in or opting out. And then the second piece of feedback that we got was like, this is what we experienced ourselves too, was that we still have to email these faculty and we don't know how to, like what information to include. So we thought, hey, maybe we can build out this like data from just making it a database into like an actual like application or platform where there's like the other party that's receiving the requests. And then there's like sort of like a guided application flow to like get connected with the faculty in more of like in a standardized way rather than doing a cold email.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I'm sure has saved and will save hundreds of thousands of hours across anyone trying to figure out how to get in touch with faculty like that. So it's clear that you as a student were experiencing the pain point firsthand of trying to find the faculty research, but what did you come to realize was faculty or professors' biggest pain points? So, I mean, to build out a two-sided platform, you need to understand what they're going through and what makes sense for them. What was that process of customer discovery like?
It's funny because we went through the I-Corps program through JHTV. And while that was mainly meant for a lot of, at that time, it was like more targeted towards bio and inventions. It was actually a really helpful process for us because we realized that we were just kind of existing in our bubble, and we're like, we're going to make this platform like fully optimized for students, and students are everything, and we're students and we understand the student side. But we completely neglected like initially that there is this whole other party to it, not even mention like the paying customers, which I'm sure we'll get into later. But with the faculty, we ended up learning that faculty are really busy people, as you all know too. They're not going to spend time on a system. Anything that requires more than 30 seconds of their time, unless it's like their number one priority, which is money, grants, you have to make it absolutely flawless for them to participate in that. And mentoring students is definitely a part of their like, people feel that sense of academic duty when they're scholars at institutions, especially at like Johns Hopkins. But that's not enough for them to be like spending, more than 30 seconds to a couple of minutes on a system. So with that in mind, we realized that, we know faculty want to sort of build their teams, but in a very efficient manner. So the entire system for the faculty was built around these auto-created profiles. All their information was already there. They just had to log in with their single sign-on, claim their profile, and hit a toggle switch to say, yeah, I want to hear from students, or no, don't bother me. And that was it. So that's, I think, what kind of led to faculty being okay with the system and having students reach out to them there.
Yes, let's go into that first. I guess the MVP passed the initial Excel doc or the Google sheet you used, and you actually built out this platform. So can you describe a little bit about how that went when actually you're trying to juggle these two different stakeholders? And I'm also curious about Hopkins itself, right? Because you mentioned single sign-on and being able to already have all of this faculty data aggregated, and all they have to do is just claim their profile. Did you need Hopkins buy-in at the beginning in order to even launch a beta of this?
That's an awesome question. We started off as like a third party, unsanctioned, totally sort of random group of students getting together to try and get some grassroots efforts towards this kind of thing. And honestly, we didn't really know what the sort of journey was going to be. We were just doing it because we thought it was cool, and other people had told us that, you know, it'd be cool if we could have other people using it as well. So we actually went to Dr. Wirtz, who is the vice president for research at Johns Hopkins, and we had sort of explained our like issues with the process of getting involved in research. At this time, there was no undergraduate research office. You know, Tracy Smith wasn't in the role that she is in now, and so a lot of that support that Hopkins has now, back when we were freshmen, was still sort of in its preliminary phases. So we complained to sort of Dr. Wirtz about like, yo, this is really difficult. Like, this is the #1 like research institution in the country, and it's this difficult to find research opportunities. And then Dr. Wirtz basically said, hey, like, we're going to open up an undergraduate research office, and we're thinking about this concept of a web platform, which, you know, you guys have done some like data aggregation too, but it's going to be a while before like we can like get behind this. So that was like code for us saying that you guys will probably be graduated by the time Hopkins like is able to move resources and whatnot. So we just said, screw it, we're just going to go and build this and see if we can get enough students on the system that it pushes some faculty adoption. So what we actually did was, we knew that faculty are sort of the more resistant group to sort of get involved on like an unsanctioned platform. So the students would be able to use a database and then use our database to essentially apply to a faculty member, which would send an email actually to the faculty member. So the application was initially just disguised as an email. And so the faculty member would then respond via email. And that's sort of how we like sort of slipped in their DMs, you know, like just like subtly branding Forager One to faculty, saying like students are going to reach out. And so the student was like the node, the students were the node in the network that then eventually got like, we got a couple of hundred faculty on the system over time. And then Hopkins just couldn't ignore it at that point, because I wouldn't say couldn't ignore it. They were supportive of it, but at that point, that's when it triggered a response from the university saying, hey, like, this is an active system, people are using it. And that's when we ended up getting that adoption from Hopkins to say, let's like officially back this and integrate it. And it's taken many years, I think, to get to the spot that it is in terms of usage. But yeah, that's kind of the journey that it took. In terms of like, I think you asked about building and whatnot, we got pretty fortunate to like sync up with our 2 technical co-founders. And like, that's the one thing I miss the most about college, is like these like interactions that you can have that are just totally accepted. You know, you can't go out in the world right now and just be like, yo, you want to like build this thing with me? Or you can, but it's harder, I should say. When you're in college, like, you're always looking for things to do and like ways to connect on some deeper, bigger vision with other people. So when we met up with Mike and Nathan, and we met up with a few of our other like technical buddies, it kind of just, we were all like, yeah, let's just do it. Let's see where it goes. You know, we're students. We have nothing better to do.
Nothing better to do. Nothing to lose too. That's kind of one expression I used to use when I was first starting out in this job. It's like, everyone should shoot their shot when they're trying to start a venture in college with their friends, with other students, because like the worst thing that happens is it fizzles out, flames out spectacularly, and you're still a Hopkins student. You're still getting a degree from a really premier institution. So I think it is nice to even just have that, have less inhibition, just like, screw it, start it now. And sometimes great things happen. So you did sell to Hopkins, and that was your first customer, right?
Yeah, it's interesting because like when we started on the process of figuring out, is this a system that people would pay for, which we didn't even know. We had gone through with that I-Corps program thinking about, oh, would like students pay for it? Would some faculty have like some grant money? And we realized, like, I think the data that we collected was about like some small fraction, maybe like less than a third of like faculty would consider, having some type of like service to get, graduate students and undergraduate students involved in their group. And so we quickly realized that like our buyer had to be a high level or, associate provost, vice provost level person with, a goal that matched what Forager One was going to accomplish, which at the time we didn't know like what the goals were. We didn't have as many metrics or things to like point to. So it was kind of unclear. So what we ended up doing was, like, as you mentioned, thanks to FFU and like a few others involved in the Hopkins ecosystem, we went from all the way down to like professors, interviewing professors and talking to like department heads, all the way up to, we got some face-to-face with President Daniels and Provost Kumar, and just trying to figure out like whose budget is this going to come out of? Whose like strategic goal in like essentially this organization are we going to be able to align with to be able to push this concept of like experiential education forward? And that's how we end up coming across Farouk Day, who's like the I think his title is a vice provost for experiential learning or something, some fancy title like that. One of the first of its kind in the country. And Hopkins had specifically took him from Stanford to really design a more experiential based education. We said, okay, whoa, this is like the perfect match. And it was so funny because we spent like hours with all these other admin. And as soon as we got in a room with Farouk, we explained like what we were thinking our pricing to be. He negotiated it down. He was just like, look, like we can go through this whole process. You can charge tens and thousands of dollars to like, get approval. But if you put it under this budget, I'll buy it right now. And he didn't even look at the platform. Like we just talked about it from a concept. We like tried to put the computer in front of us. He's like, no, put that away. Like I don't need to see it. And so it's funny when you like get in the right room with the right buyer, like it's this like click, it's just like, this is the person that like we need to sort of appeal to and like build a partnership with. So that's kind of how it felt.
Yeah. So, that is funny. Then you want to do the walkthrough of the demo. I'm sure you were like obsessing over the exact way you were going to present this to him and really try to seal the deal. And he's like, no, just here's the price, I'll pay. That is wild to hear. So what are some like, so you have three main stakeholders, at least three main stakeholders with Forager One, right? You have the students, you have the faculty researchers, but then you do have these payers and they all care about different things. And I think the students and the faculty, it's more or less obvious what they care about, what they want to get out of the platform. But what are some of the metrics or value propositions that the payer, whether it be Office of Undergrad Research or Experiential Learning, what do they look for and care about when trying to use Forager One?
Yeah, something we learned with enough conversations, we ended up doing about I think 50 customer discovery interviews with admin after we got totally cussed out by one of the I-Corps directors, which he just called us out straight on our BS. He was like, you guys are interviewing students and faculty. Those are not your buyers. They're not your customers, and you're building value for those users, which is great. But if you just want to stay freemium forever, like go and actually talk to people who have like budgets and power to make this a reality in terms of a commercial product. So we ended up going through that whole journey, and we quickly realized that at that level, at the administrative level, what they really care about is those metrics that you were sort of talking about, from capturing the count on like how many undergraduates are getting involved in research, what are some of the areas or departments that need additional like facilitation between students and faculty. So one of the things that we do very closely with the undergraduate research office right now is measuring sort of the activity and engagement, the collaborations that are happening within departments, between departments. Where can we facilitate and foster additional interdisciplinary interaction? That's how sort of our faculty to faculty collaboration also came into play in Forager. Was those high-level admin were like, okay, it's cool that you facilitate student and faculty interaction, but like you have this database that faculty can use to fund others. So like when the pandemic hit too, like we found all of these like collaborations happening between different JHU professors for like COVID related research, which is really cool to see. So I think as we started talking to the buyer, it helped us get I guess a more like higher level vision of what this could accomplish for the institution, which has also allowed us to sort of transition into being a not just like a product oriented company with like one product in the space or just like one idea, but like more of a provider of services and tools to academia and higher education in general. Because we started thinking more, rather than from like the student perspective or the individual faculty perspective, we thought more from like the ecosystem perspective.
Yeah, well, that's a good segue, because I do want to hop into what you've been doing over this past year, because you've been serving the ecosystem you're meeting people where they are, which is online on their computers right now. So you came out with this platform called the Symposium, right, which is meant to hold engaging virtual events in the academic space. And from my perspective, it seems like a huge lead generation opportunity, especially if I'm understanding correctly, you were giving this away for free at the beginning, just to get people on board, just to give them something they could use to try to reclaim some sense of normalcy when it comes to these academic presentations and showcases. So I got a bunch of questions about this, but was the idea or the concept behind Symposium, was that already in the product roadmap, or was that a total response to the market that you were seeing in the wake of COVID?
It's such a funny and weird story, and it's still like hard for us to process today, um, because it was just totally unexpected. So with the transition to virtual, or sorry, with the pandemic starting in March of last year, we were working with about somewhere under 10 institutions on our first system at that time. And Forager One, like that product itself, it's like it's a very enterprise product, so it takes a long time to implement. Now it's pretty big contract value, so it's a slow sort of process. So we were working with about 10, a little under 10 institutions then, and those 10, as well as the other community partners that we were sort of developing leads for to sort of sell that first system. When the transition to virtual happened, we realized a lot of these admin were complaining about how there wasn't a good tool to host these virtual events that you were talking about. And so they were using like Blackboard or like Canvas, their LMS system. Some were using Twitter, some were trying to like build their own sites. And it was just like an absolute nightmare. And what we ended up hearing was all of these events were being canceled. So then Yash was reading, my co-founders are reading on one of the forums that we participated. It was just like, it's like a thread. And all of these people were like saying like, hey, does like people have people thought about how they're pivoting their events from in-person to virtual for like these showcases? And Yosh was like, wouldn't it be cool if we could like do something there? And it was just like on a casual happy hour that we're having. It really wasn't like an idea or brainstorming session. It wasn't very intentional. And I was like, then I started looking at the forums. I was like, this is actually something that we could do to like generate a lot of brand awareness in the space. So we took a step back from that first system. We basically had a week-long hackathon, the four of us plus a few contractors that we had been working with for our first system anyways. And we said, let's just build like this really dirty, quick, like free system that just helps these events be hosted so that don't get canceled. And we posted on that forum, we're like, yo, we're thinking about building this thing, like this is some of the things that we're thinking about based off the feedback from this forum, who's interested in like working with us to host their events. So we'll try and support who we can. We heard from 150 different colleges and universities on that. It became the most active thread on that forum in the entire history of that entire organization, which is really overwhelming. We were not prepared for that kind of a response. We worked with about 50 universities and colleges to host their events in April and May. And honestly, I thought that was going to be it. Like we built this thing. It was using Google Forms and like Mike's, who's our technical co-founder, his like Angular app that he had done for like one of his engineering projects at Hopkins. And we just like repurposed that. It was garbage. And it still like met this need. And so people were really interested in sort of using it. So we got about those 50 institutions, and then we're like, okay, it's going to be wrapped up. It was a good thing we did for the community. People know our name now, which we were like, okay, we can go to continue selling and cross-selling our first system with the new relationships that we developed. What ended up happening was, well, two things, I guess. One is the COVID crisis became way more extended than any of us could have predicted. So our institutions that we were working with were like, this is going to happen again for our summer events, for our fall events, and for even now we're in the next spring for these spring events as well. And then two, a lot of the institutions that we're working with on that system said, hey, a lot of these like virtual and hybrid components to higher education are going to be here to stay. So they literally were like, you guys should not dissolve Symposium or like do anything to get rid of it. And you should make it into an offering of its own and we'll pay for it. And so we said, okay, like, let's figure out like our costs. We did like a few iterative like pricing models based off of like what the customers were saying they could afford. Our very first Symposium buyer literally came, she was from actually I won't say the institution, but she came to us and she's like, I have extra money in my budget because all my events have been canceled. I have extra money left over from the venue and from the food. And we're like, okay, how much? And she said a figure, and she said basically $4,000. And we're like, all right, $4,000, let's do it. You're on an annual plan now. That's how our first sale for Symposium happened. We still charge $4,000 for that specific package. It actually stuck really well. It's a really good figure. And to date, we've hosted about 250 events on that system. We work with 150 different schools. And then we have a few professional conferences like that we work with on that system as well. So totally unpredicted, like we did not predict that at all, but it seemed to be such a such a clear need that it would have been foolish to continue offering it for free. And we needed to dedicate resources, infrastructure, and staff. Like the reason Symposium has become the product it has today is because we've invested a lot into it, which has come from the customers. So is a very, very different sort of go to market than Forager One. And now it's more like, instead of cross-selling, it's like Symposium is more of like a B2C play where organizers will just swipe their credit card, buy Symposium, and Forager One's more sort of like the enterprise play. We also have like an enterprise version of Symposium, but that's a little bit different.
Interesting. Yeah, it's not too often you conceive of and launch a product within like a week of each other. And I think it just speaks to your team's ability. And it's funny, like I know your team well to do those types of sprints. Like I remember one time, like, hey, can we get access to our house over the weekend so we can just like do a 48-hour, just like crazy design sprint? Like hell yeah, who's gonna say no to that? That's awesome. So I think that you recognize the need, but the execution is huge, right? I mean, a lot of people probably like, hey, there should be a platform that people can host virtual events on. And you're like, there should be, and I'm going to stitch it together with all these things. But at the same time, you had this product or the service that you were trying to sell into universities as well with the flagship Forager One, that platform. So how did you manage kind of those two, the push and pull of like, all right, well, clearly this is the need right now, but our moneymaker is actually selling into universities at a rate, which I imagine is much higher than $4,000 a year. How did your team go about managing those dueling strategies?
Believe it or not, it's something we still kind of struggle with, I'll be honest, is we have these two systems, and Symposium does also have, like I just alluded to this, an enterprise version, which goes for just about the same rate. Usually tens of thousands of dollars. We have like a base price of $15K for the Symposium enterprise version, and like, Mississippi State was one of our first customers, and they pay per student and per faculty member per staff. So that part of Symposium does generate a lot of, revenue per customer. But I think what we kind of realized was that with Symposium, it was an easy entry point into the institution because the need was so there, and it was so present, while the price point was low enough that it didn't really require any red tape. So the sales were really quick for Symposium, which we thought, hey, like even if Symposium, at that time, like we're pretty confident in the long-term vision of Symposium now. We know a lot of our institutions are going to continue using it even when we go in person. But back, last summer, it wasn't clear how, what the life of Symposium was going to be. So we said, hey, even if we can just sell fast at a rate that just lets people make a quick decision, because it's just a few thousands of dollars, sometimes even less for like a single event. Our single event pricing ranges from like $600 to $1,200. So something that a lot of administrators would be able to put like on a credit card. Yeah. And we said, hey, like if we can get our entry point, develop out these relationships, get sort of recognized as a vendor at these institutions, then eventually we'll be able to upsell, whether that's with their first system or with the enterprise version of Symposium. Interestingly, we decided to take the route of, with Symposium, we're not actually cross-selling Forager One as much as we are upselling our current Symposium clients on the enterprise version of Symposium. So because we have 7 different people who have made 7 different purchases, eventually that catches the attention of a higher level buyer like the CIO, who's like, we're paying 7 different times for the same system. Let's just go on an enterprise. So I think we've kind of taken that approach where it's like, there is some benefit to recognizing some of those low entry points that could generate a lot of value. And frankly, even together, how many like transactions we do, like right now on our site's fully automatic. So we've transitioned like essentially all of our payment processing to be automatic. So I don't have to set anyone up, which was a big step for us, because now people can literally just go on Symposium, buy the product and use it without like any effort on our side.
So everyone aspires to get to in a SaaS model.
Exactly. Yeah. So when you hit that, you're just like, okay, it's just how many people can we reach? So even if people are making like $600 or $1,200 purchases and they're happening every day, it adds up.
That adds up. I think you and your team have just done such a fantastic job of not only networking, but just taking advantage of the different opportunities your way. And from my point of view, one of the biggest ones seemed to be the Mass Challenge Accelerator up in Boston. Which is, for those that don't know, I believe the largest, if not one of the largest in the country. It was just incredibly competitive to get in. They always tout like the thousands of people that apply, and you were one of the 50 teams, something like that.
100.
100, which even crazier that they have that many people that they do, but they do such a good job. So tell me a little bit about your experience in the Mass Challenge Accelerator, and how was that able to accelerate you this past year, or the year that you were doing it?
Yeah, it's something I've given a lot of thought to, because I used to be a really, really active in the Mass Challenge community. It's been a little bit harder with the pandemic, of course, and the accelerators are all virtual right now. But yeah, I definitely got a lot. We all got a lot out of Mass Challenge. I think there was like the experience itself. It wasn't necessarily as much of the instruction and the seminars and things like that. Well, those are really good. They do provide like a good sort of, I guess, foundation for some of the things to think about when you're running a business, like developing sales pipeline and what are the best practices for like operations and management, and some things to think about when you're like raising around, like the technicals there. But I think now that we're this far into the pandemic as well, like a lot of that content is available, without going through an accelerator. And, YC has their startup school as well, which is like free to attend and has all that content and like nice little, YouTube lectures and things like that. They're also fun. So I think we really enjoyed Mass Challenge because it was more of a community. Like as you're going through this like journey of trying to find product market fit, and it was fun. It was fun because there was a lot of different companies that had different stages. So we felt like, and you all are probably experiencing this too. It's like the journey in entrepreneurship feels like you have bipolar disorder. You literally have some of the best weeks and some of the worst weeks of your life, like consecutively. Yeah, it takes an emotional and like mental toll on you. So having that community where you can sort of like talk through the issues that you're facing, or it's nice to know when some people are facing the other problems and here's how they're approaching it, or you have a company who's like in their Series C, or like has exited, or like you have a founder who's like exited multiple companies in the same room, and now you're just like shooting the shit, excuse my language, with someone who's been a few steps ahead of you, and vice versa, for companies that are earlier than you too. It's like this nice sense of feeling like you're supported and you belong within an accelerator space. And I think that was kind of the most unique part of being in the accelerator. I think a lot of the connections that we made through there, were still like pretty active in that community. There are definitely investors. I mean, it's really nice to attend an accelerator that's in a city that you imagine some of your operations being in, for sure. Because I feel like a lot of accelerators do have a lot of connections with local investors, angels, angel groups, VCs. And, when they come in and give talks and things like that, you've now like established a relationship with those people. So we have a lot of those connections that we've just kind of been keeping in the loop, and have helped us out along the way.
Great. Yeah, it seems really valuable for all those introductions and all of that just support, and just like having a community you can go to. And that's one thing I do try to build, and I think every accelerator tries to build, and the good ones are able to succeed at it. But you mentioned something about being in the same room as investors, but you quite consciously have not raised any dilutive capital, correct? Or at least very, very little or none. So you made a decision not to raise a round. What were some of the considerations that you and Yash were thinking of when trying to decide when or if there's a right time to raise a round?
Yeah, it's something is definitely weird about us as an organization. I think there was a little bit, like when we were going through Mass Challenge, this little bit of, oh, should we be raising too because everyone else is raising? So there was definitely like a very conscious like internal discussion about what we should be doing and when. And we came to sort of realize that we really want to take on, I think there's all these narratives around investing in entrepreneurship, and there's just so many articles that people have posted about it. And I think it's definitely getting better, but there's this like glorification of raising money. Even accelerators, like even Mass Challenge does this, Techstars does this, everyone does this. It's like, how much money have our companies collectively raised, which is great. I mean, it does speak to something. It's not to undermine that value, but it seems to be the metric, which was kind of bothersome, because it felt like as we were going through it, we were landing deals or figuring out our way in our landscape, and always like, well, we want to see like how much revenue can we generate, not really how much time can we spend on working with investors and and there wasn't a real need for it. We were recently graduated. We were crashing at our parents' place. We didn't have any like crazy expenses. So, like, I do understand. I do have friends that are much older and they're like starting their like third or fourth company and they're just going to raise right off the bat to like make sure they can have their lifestyle. But we weren't in those shoes. So we said, hey, like we can make these sacrifices. We might as well just be scrappy and try to, because if I went to go raise a round, even now it's something that I think about. Like if I went to go raise a round, I would be spending my time on my investor pipeline instead of my customer pipeline.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think we've consciously decided to take a very like customer focused approach, which is eventually when we get to the point where we feel like we want to take, 1 million in ARR to like 10 million in ARR, and we've created the infrastructure to do that, and all that we need is capital and like hiring out a sales team, then we will definitely raise. But
Right.
I think trying to raise to figure stuff out is, in my opinion, not necessarily the most productive way of spending your time in trying to get product market fit or building out your customer base. Like right now, we 100% for sure for like Symposium itself have product market fit. It's not even a question of that. It's now the question for us is, do we have a sales strategy that we can repeat and scale? If I were to hire 5 salespeople tomorrow, would we be able to 10x our revenue? The answer to that is no. We're not there yet. And I can't hire 5 people and say, this is exactly what you need to do. Here's what you need to say. Here's the steps to get there. Here's the content that we produce for you. And so taking in money right now wouldn't actually help me accomplish that until we've created those frameworks. And that's what we're doing right now. And so we might raise later, but we're lucky in that I think we've gotten enough revenue through customers that there's also not like a pressing need. We don't feel like cash strapped. I mean, burn rate is always a question, and how much we're investing in like our development is always a thing that we look at every day, or every month. But yeah, we don't feel like to survive we need money. So yeah, I mean, we're paying ourselves like not much. I mean, it's a little bit above minimum wage, but we're getting by, and I'd rather have it that way, where we have more equity in business and a little bit more control than raising like a 1.5 million round right now and then giving away 20% of the company and then going down the VC.
That's really insightful. I mean, hey, kudos to you in the past year. I think it's not that you're happy COVID happened, but I'm sure it's been really a good thing in terms of acceleration and like in terms of getting the structure in place to really just formalize what you've been doing.
It's definitely boosted business. I mean, the friends that I have that have raised rounds, it's very, I don't know, they're things are definitely different, I think, with my day-to-day and theirs. And the clock definitely starts. Like when you raise a round, it starts and you feel it every day that, hey, like we have to get to this next spot. Like, and that's great. Like everyone should have that, but the pressure's there, the time is there. You have to meet milestones. And once you raise, you're probably not profitable, and you are probably going to need an additional round of raising, which means you have to meet these metrics in an X amount of time to be, you get into the rat race. So as long as you're ready for that, sounds great, because you're going to be able to raise additional rounds, and then you're going to be able to scale, and you're going to be able to meet those metrics. But I feel like if we did that now, or if you do that prematurely, you're like starting the clock and getting all these like external pressures when you're trying to figure things out and build build cool shit. The tone changes, I feel like, when people raise their rounds.
It does, and sometimes that changes for the better, but other times it'll accelerate when it doesn't need to be accelerated. But ultimately, raising is typically a decision that comes down to the CEO of the company, right? And I think it's really interesting that you have a structure. It's not unheard of, but it's definitely rare where you have co-CEOs, right? So typically you see, okay, well, this person, even if 2 people come up with like the exact same idea, or they're in from the very beginning together, it's like, okay, well, I'll do CEO and you do COO, or you do CTO, you do some other CO something. But you and Josh decided, screw it, we're co-CEOs. A couple questions on that. Mainly, one, what made you want to go down that route together? And then how does the co-CEO model play out in actuality in like day-to-day operations?
Well, we could split the roles up with titles. We were kind of working very much in sync. And then we realized also this, because of that, and because of the titles and the roles that we had, we ended up realizing that it was actually really beneficial to have 2 people that were viewed by the external world as equal. And that it's a huge kind of like advantage you don't think about when you see like co-CEOs, but that means they're even though Yash and I, we don't really overlap in our work at all. We have very distinct roles. But whenever like meetings come up and I can't make something, Yash can, or vice versa, and they still feel like they're meeting with number one of the organization.
Yeah.
So there's a very tangible benefit when if you have a really good relationship with your co-founder and you're both sort of leading the organization, but in different ways, to brand it together as like we're the co-CEOs. We're working sort of like hand in hand and we're leading the organization in different ways. And there's this tangible benefit of anytime either of us, like it feels like we can like cover for each other all the time, which is a huge burden off of each other's shoulders. Like if I want to go on vacation for 2 weeks and like I have these relationships, I just pass them on to Yash. Nobody gets like pissed, no one's like, oh, you're like giving me to your number two, or like you're handing down, like I want to talk with you, it's like it's nice when we have both of us sort of at the top there.
Yeah, I never even thought of that benefit of just the external view or the perspective of being able to have the two number ones. It's not even like 1A, 1B, it's two ones. So I think that's really cool to be able to have that, and clearly has been working, especially when you have the same title, quote unquote title that you've given, anointed yourselves, but also it's not like you're stepping on toes in terms of your day to day. I think that to me seems like if that situation arises, then that's definitely the right way to take it.
If there was a lap of roles, it would have failed. Yeah, if we were doing the same things, it would always like. I think the reason we had some mentors who were sort of advising us against it was they were exactly worried about that, like the decision making and all of that, like who has final say in what. And I mean, Yash and I have been like, friends for a long time. And like I said, we've had our ups and downs, but we've finally gotten like a productive framework together where, if there are decisions that need to be made, it's very clear whose domain that falls under.
Awesome. Ansh, seriously, thank you so much for the time. I feel like I learned a lot. You clearly hit on something that people are paying for, and we're in a new era. Like we're not going to say no to these digital solutions going forward. I think it's just going to keep expanding, and I'm excited to see how you tap into that. So really appreciate if everyone could again give an off mute or emoji clap, whatever you want to do to show your appreciation for Yash. Really do appreciate your time.
Thanks, everyone. No, it's maybe one of these days I'll see you in Baltimore. I mean, I used to do a lot of traveling, and once the pandemic has calmed down, I'll pay a visit to Hopkins, and we have other Maryland institutions, so maybe I'll see some of you.
Yeah, please do.